A very good afternoon to all of you. I am Ella, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and the First View Group to the Solar Market Outlook Southern Africa 2023 webinar. Before we proceed further, I would like to thank our panel members for their immense support to organize this event and extend my heartfelt gratitude to our sponsor, Clenergy, for being our crusaders and making this event possible. Their commitment to promoting sustainable energy solutions is truly commendable. Thank you all for joining us from around the world to delve into the current and future landscape of the solar market in Southern Africa. I would now request my team to play the commercial video for Clenergy.
Club fans, how are you? My name is Marcela Pampin from Clenergy. Today we're at WIFES 2023 in Abu Dhabi. So please, if you're joining now for the first time on our channel, don't forget to like, subscribe and share. So come and join me, I'll show you around our booth. Australian-Chinese company based in Xiamen and in Melbourne. We have our own factories actually in Xiamen, so that's great because we get to customize anything that our clients need to get for them the best solutions. Today we're here at the World Future Energy Summit 2023. That is WIFES, which is held down in Abu Dhabi. For this particular show, over 14,000 people are attending and we're over 141 countries exhibiting. During these 3 days in our booth, we're showcasing a tracker solution. This is our Easy Tracker D1P. So this motor can hold up to 90 panels, that's 45 on each side. All the panels have to go in portrait, and this is an amazing solution because, as we said before, we can customize anything that you need of this beauty. If it's solar roof what you're looking for, then our PV Easy Rack mounting solution is perfect for you. Over here, we got it in silver, but thanks to Clenergy Hollywood, we also got it in black. For ground mounting solution, in this opportunity, we're showcasing Solar Terrace Mat. This is our most cost-effective solution if you're looking for some ground mount. For more Solar Terrace products, please visit us in Clenergy.com, fill out the form, and we will for sure assess you in your next project. So that was all for today. Thank you so much for being with me during this day. Please don't forget, like, subscribe, share, follow, tell your friends, tell everybody. So see you next time.
Thank you, team. May I now invite Mr. Samir Jacob, Global Marketing Manager, Clenergy, to give the presentation for his company.
Thank you, Ala, and appreciate being here today. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. I'll just quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen there now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Cool. So with Clenergy, thank you for watching our little promo video there. And I thought I'll just give you an explanation about our key mission. For us, it's all about enabling carbon neutrality. And we within our business have options, whether it's electrical or mechanical products. And when you look at various governments and corporate enterprises, everyone's got their targets for 2040, 2050 for hitting carbon neutrality. And for us as a company, we see ourselves as that enabler, giving you the right amount of technology to help you on that journey. In terms of Clenergy as the company, as my colleague just earlier mentioned, we are founded in Melbourne, Australia. We have our factories based in China, Indonesia, and also in Australia. We have done almost over 20 gigawatts with worldwide installations, massive amount of patents within the solar mounting industry. And our core business has always been in terms of research and development, manufacturing, and obviously global distribution. We also do our own projects across China, Germany, and Australia. And we also do a lot of investments into other solar farms and parks. And in terms of a brand, we are an award-winning brand across not only the UK and Australia, but right across Southeast Asia as well. And recently this year, also winning an award in Abu Dhabi for our tracker system. In terms of our team, we have a fairly large group of us here in Melbourne. We are also spread across with an incentive team across Japan. And now, as of last year, when we hit our 15-year anniversary, we've been expanding quite rapidly across the MENA region, Europe, and now even the Americas. That's the little world map there with our little Clenergy offices, and also our distribution network, which are all the little black points across that map. In terms of our main product lines, under Clenergy, we've got our solar mounting brand, which is PV EasyRack, which is obviously now it is now available in South Africa, and which I'll give you details a little bit later in the slides. And we also have our cable tray business, which is called Runner. Within the solar mounting category of PV EasyRack, where they are looking for roof mount, ground mount, tracker systems, even completely all black products for roof mount, or even ground structures, we've got you sorted for all of those avenues of solar mounting. So in terms of the different types of roof mounting roofs, whether you're looking at metal roofs or what we call as tin roofs, whether they're tile or even flat, we've got options for you. Where it comes to specifically metal or tin roofs, we've got penetrative as well as non-penetrative solutions. Penetrative, that's basically going through the purlins to fasten your racking to that roof, or non-penetrative, where we've got clip lock clamp options. Also, additionally, when it comes to flat roofs, where if you're looking at tilt angles, we've got adjustable tilts, tripods, which are pre-assembled tilts, as well as our new commercial tilt 2.0, which comes in 5, 10, and 15 degrees fixed tilts. So depending on your latitude and longitude, there's various options that are available to you. If you've got concrete roofs, we've also got a solution for that, which is our ballast system called Ascent. And as you can see with the image here, there is no penetration, so there's it reduces all your risk in terms of any water leakages and things like that. So you're just fastening down your solar panels and weighing it down with concrete bricks there. So let me give you a little bit of a case study that we've just done over a couple of years ago. It comes to a non-penetrative solution on a government building in Australia.
So we first came to site in February of 2020. The construction or the main structure was already up and the roof was on. Our main goal was to scope the job and understand how we were going to install from there. There were some specific guidelines that we had to adhere to. The first one was analysing the risk of the pitches of the roof. The second one was maximising the system size with the space we had on the roof.
The project was started on the 27th of January. During that week, we started with a few guys on site and ramped up between 2 to 6 guys. And it took about 3.5 weeks from start to finish for the installation of the solar system.
It's a clip lock roof, so we've got clip lock clamps on there. So we chose Clenergy for the mounting system on this one. We had to actually engineer the system specifically for this roof. We're up a bit higher here, and through Morwell we do get some extreme winds and some weather. So we got that engineered, and we've actually shortened the clip lock spacing substantially, which increases the structural integrity of the panels while they're on the roof.
Cool. And just to add to what the gentleman was saying there earlier, when it comes to our mounting gear, when you talk to our technical staff, our sales teams, it's not just about securing right mounting, it's also looking at all the structural and civil engineering about the job. So whether you're looking at the soil terrains, you're looking at the wind regions, all of this helps us design the best system for the particular project at hand in terms of working with the panel manufacturer and the installer on the panel spacing and things of that nature. Here's some options, and just to give you some glimpse of the non-penetrative on the far left middle, and some of the penetrative solutions with our L-feet there on the far right. In terms of different types of clamps, the most traditional would be, I guess, the inter and mid clamps and the end clamps, but then we also have a huge variety of non-penetrative clamps. There's just 5 options here in terms of images, but once you go through our catalog, you'll see there's a lot of different roof profiles that we cater to. If you're looking for a nice clean finish, especially with all the solar panel manufacturers making all black panels with black frames and black backing sheets, it just makes sense to have black racking as well, just so you can now provide a premium all black finish to that home installation. And obviously we've got options where for tile, metal, for tile metal roofs. Apologies, yes. And in terms of our next category here is, of course, our ground mounts, which we call as the Solar Terrace, and we've got a variety of options there. My colleague earlier mentioned a Solar Terrace MAC, which is a ground mount solution, and all the aluminum and metal gear is coated with a magnesium zinc alloy, calling it a MAC finish, giving it a little bit more robustness. But in terms of our traditional products, we've got the Solar Terrace 2, 3, and 5. And basically what it is it's whether it's a single or a double post, or double post with additional braces at the back. Basically the way you would choose your ground mount is going from the lowest number to the highest number, depending on your soil conditions, your wind categories, and how much or what strength level are you looking for that particular site location. Just to give you an example, I'll show you one here.
This is why we went to ground mountain. I'm really happy with it, really love it.
On this project, we've decided to use the Solar Terrace 2, which is a really good, rigid, great solution for ground mount, and the support that we've got from Clenergy all throughout the whole process of installing this one, as far as engineering, design, tech support, know-how, setup, degrees, is just next level. Clenergy has just been fantastic with helping out on that, and they've got the best engineering that we can find in Australia that we've come across, and that's why I've always been super happy to use Clenergy.
It's always good when you have good testimonials from great installers across the plains. The next category I wanted to show you here was also our tracker systems. And so here you also got a variety of options, whether you're looking at a single panel in portrait, dual panels, or dual panels with some extra smarts behind it in terms of weather tracking and such. One of which my colleague earlier, Marcela, showed you in the video. All these videos, all these products are available on our website, so you can get more information on there. There was just a project, I think, a couple of years ago that we launched in China, which was about, let me put the audio a bit lower. Yeah, so this was, I think, a site that took about 3 months to put together. It's a 293 megawatts. It's dual panel, as you can see there. And some part of the structure is flat and straight on, whereas some part is actually tilted towards the sun. So to give that extra bit of efficiency through the lifetime of the system. And until 2 weeks ago, this was probably our biggest tracker project across the world. Just last 2 weeks ago, we just got approved for a 340 megawatt tracker project. Again, this one in China as well. If you're looking at other ground structures, things like carports, these are really popular at the moment. On the far left, we've got options there, which is our Easy Shade 2.0. This one comes in single or double bay, whether you're looking for in black or in silver. Great little neat little solution where whether it's residential or even if you wanted to go commercial, all you got to do is you can set them up in series side by side, and then you can just keep replicating them. We also have our Easy Shade Razor, the one in the middle, which is at that Tesla supercharger site. And this one here has one beam on one side, so it's easier for when you open the doors of your car. So and it's a little bit more robust in terms of holding up a much larger system. We also have post mounts, which are really popular in agricultural sites, or for for bore wells and things like that. So and those hold anything between, I think, 2, 6, 8, and up to 10 panels, all just on one post. If you're looking at our other option in terms of cable trays, we have our Runner brand, and provided that our history has always been in the solar mounting space, we've actually designed our cable trays for the solar mounting industry. And that's why what you'll notice is that on our lids of our cable tray, we actually emboss the words warning solar DC on it, because typically in most commercial or any kind of sites, when you put solar on and you've got live wires, a lot of installers will put like stickers on saying warning or solar DC to let people know that it's live wires. So you might put stickers, you might put spray paint, but what we're saying is in 2-3 years that'll just fade away. We just emboss it directly on there. And just to give you an idea, it's a very simple cable trays, which most of you probably used in the past. So whether you're looking to go up, down, around in curves, T-junctions, we've got solutions for the lot. In terms of our online presence, there's a load of content there to check out, whether you're looking for panel discussions, how to install videos, testimonials, all of our industry awards and interviews. It's all available on our website under the media section. So I invite you all to definitely give that a look. And with us at Clenergy, it is very important for us to give back also to our community. So there's a couple of universities that we partner with, whether it's their EV car departments in their electrical engineering, or their solar powered cars, or whether it's the It's Time Foundation, which provides ground mount systems across the Pacific for schools who are out of reach to the grid, all of which is part of our corporate social responsibility programs, which is very important to us. If you're looking for product locally in South Africa, I recommend you jump onto Clenergy.com and look for our little distributor button, and then look for the store locator. On the drop-down button, click for South Africa, and you'll get our distributor, Clenerac. Their head office is based in Cape Town, but they've got outlets in Joburg as well, and other locations. So give them a call, and they'll be able to sort you out. This is the team there at Clenerac, and if you want, you could scan that QR code, which leads you to the video that's on the screen there, and it's the team showing you exactly if you were looking to buy a kit, this is all the different items that you'll actually have in the box. In terms of some of our partners globally, just so I'll put some of their names and logos here. A lot of the brands that some of you might recognize, whether it's across Australia and New Zealand, or whether across Japan with brands like Norval or Marriott or Canadian Solar, or across Asia Pacific with JJ Lab or Solar Energy, and Prime, and quite extensively all across Europe, right from Ireland all the way down to Romania. We've got outlets all across the continent. Well, that's pretty much it from myself. Thank you so much for your time. And if you want more information, jump onto Clenergy.com. If you want to reach out to us, it's sales@Clenergy.com. We've got all our documents on our downloads page, and that's all of our social channels if you want to keep in touch. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Over back to you, Ala. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jacob, for that informative presentation. Here I would like to make a small announcement. Attendees can post their questions in the Q&A box, and our speakers will answer those questions at the end of the panel discussion. So let's take a deep dive into the solar market outlook in Southern Africa now. In an era where the urgency of combating climate change is paramount, Southern Africa is at the forefront of an exhilarating transformation in the realm of solar energy. This region boasts exceptional potential for harnessing clean and renewable power sources, offering not only a path to sustainability, but also the promise of robust economic growth, new employment opportunities, and enhanced energy security. Southern Africa, blessed with an abundance of sunlight and propelled by remarkable advancements in solar technology, finds itself on the cusp of a genuine solar revolution. Governments, forward-thinking businesses, and local communities are all eagerly embracing the boundless possibilities that solar energy brings to the table. It's not just an option, it's now a vital and central component of their energy strategy. This webinar will serve as a platform for industry leaders, policymakers, innovators, and stakeholders to come together and explore the dynamic changes occurring in Southern Africa's solar energy sector. Our goal is to foster a deeper understanding of the opportunities and challenges in this evolving landscape, as well as to showcase successful projects and initiatives that are already driving progress. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to our esteemed panel of speakers for today. Mr. Lee Smith, Head of Renewables Sub-Saharan Africa, ABL Group. Mr. Frank Spencer, Regional Director, Kane Mani. Mr. Brandon Horn, Head of Commercial Solar Africa Energy. Mr. Dirk Van Staden, Business Development Manager, New Southern Energy. Mr. Lee Smith, Head of Renewables Sub-Saharan Africa, ABL Group, will be the moderator of the session today. Over to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning, good afternoon to you all, depending on where you're joining from in the world. It's great that you can join us today to be talking about this very exciting market. Before we dive into the panel discussions, I just want to set the scene, perhaps just with some clarification on terminology that we might be using, just to make sure that we're on the same page. So you might hear C&I or commercial and industrial being used. I would say for the point of this discussion, we keep that definition down to the 1 to 2 megawatt scale, 1 to 2 megawatt scale, which would typically be installed on industrial sites, agri-market, commercial and industrial, sort of factories and the like. And then if we talk about the public tender utility scale, so something like the REIPP, that's the terminology we'll use. There's also the private sector utility scale behind the meter. And then we're starting to also see private sector utility scale of wheeling. So those are the various sizes of technology that we might be discussing today. And then regionally, we'll be mostly talking about South Africa, but if we can cast light on Namibia, Botswana, and Mozambique, our direct neighbors, that would also be interesting if anybody's got insights into that. And then technologies, obviously, we've got conventional solar PV, we've got floating solar PV, which we've got a few projects in the country, but hasn't really taken off yet. We've got hybridization with battery energy storage, which I think is quite a pertinent topic. And then perhaps we can, if anybody has direct knowledge in working on such projects, we can go on to hydrogen and power to X. And in terms of forecast capacity, just to set the scene. So we have the IRP 2019, which we know is outdated. And that only shows about 6 gigawatts of new capacity to be by 2030. But recent reports that I've read suggest that we'll get to 8 gigs by 2027. So there's a gap there. And it's unclear whether this is going to come via public tender processes such as the REIPP, or if it's going to come from the emerging parallel private utility market, as well as the smaller scale C&I market. And then in terms of new market mechanisms that are opening, we're starting to see wheeling becoming prominent. Energy trading is starting to become a reality now. And then there's also the possibility of seeing privatized grid strengthening, ownership and operation of the grid. And just yesterday, there was an article published in which Mr. Ramaphosa, our electricity minister, said that 100 billion rands worth of investment is required by the end of this year to finance immediate needs for the grid expansion. And he's talking about 250 billion required over the next 10 years to build out and meet demand. Now, we know Eskom will not have the balance sheet for this. It won't have the liquidity for this. And so there are already hints that private sector involvement will become a reality within the grid. And that's something that I think is quite exciting, but without any policy behind that, remains quite a gray area for us at the moment. In terms of constraints to we know that there's an election year next year, and we know that typically when elections are coming up, the government doesn't really make any big decisions. So it's unlikely that we're going to be seeing major decisions in terms of opening up of tender rounds until after elections have gone through. We know that we have a Department of Minerals and Resources and Energy that is focused on the longevity of coal. There's no secrets there. And of course, we have to keep in mind that there are social economic impacts in decommissioned plants that would have detrimental impact on local towns that rely on coal. So we cannot just simply shut down coal in the country. And I think that's fair. And it needs a holistic approach to how we decommission coal and replace it with renewables. Then there's conflicting information on the role and the authority that our electricity minister, Mr. Ramaphosa, actually has. There's some news articles recently published this week as well, talking about whether there will be an oversight committee for this particular portfolio and who he's going to report to next year and so on. So that is a concern that I personally have. Then we have a market where bidding tariffs in round 6 of the REIPP were unrealistically low and have set a bad market precedent. And what we're starting to see is the market turning away from the REIPP and looking more towards the more lucrative private scale market. We know that there's a fundamental lack of grid capacity, as round 6 showed us with the wind projects. And we've got new grid access rules, which are bumping around. And initially, when they were published for comment, were very onerous and difficult for projects to achieve. Eskom has backpedaled on that, and it's become a bit more reasonable, but still it needs to be finalized. So there's gray area there. And then, of course, there's always going to be curtailment risk. As we continue to have increased penetration of renewables, there remains this curtailment risk that we might have to just accept as part of opening up capacity on the grid, to accept that N-1 contingency might not be a reality for all projects moving forward, and will need to be factored into financial models and the like. And then, of course, there's barriers for entry for new market players, which is something that we will hopefully get onto as well. So what I'd like to do first is open the floor to Mr. Frank Spencer. So Frank can wear 2 hats. He's a spokesperson for Sapphire, as well as being the regional director Kaimani, and then he can offer his insights on that. And I think the topics that he would be best placed to offer insight into is challenges for new entrants into the market, and what roles battery energy storage can play in this market to aid in further penetration of solar PV in the market. Frank, over
thank
to you.
you, Lee. Thanks for the introduction. And I think you've captured at a high level quite a lot of where the South African market is at. Certainly seeing this transition on the utility scale projects moving from public procurement to private procurement, while the boom in rooftop solar in the residential, commercial, and industrial space continues to grow massively as well. I think the challenge for new entrants to this market is that South Africa is, in fact, already a very mature solar market. I built my first rooftop solar project in 2002, and we really started seeing the first growth of projects around 2009, with companies emerging to do rooftop solar. And since then, the market has grown exponentially. So certainly at Sapphire, We have hundreds, if not thousands now, of members who are active in this space. And that membership is growing all the time and ranges from small businesses doing residential installations right up to large utility scale EPPs, EPCs and IPPs. So I think the first challenge is to be aware that one is coming to play in an established market that also is very different to other markets. South Africa works in different ways compared to Europe or America or the East. Different regulatory rules, different technical rules. And I've also seen a number of players come to South Africa and get burnt because they've tried to work the way they used to from overseas when South Africa is different. So the importance of local understanding and local knowledge can't also be underestimated. And yet, having said that, this market is booming. We are seeing a shortage, certainly on the utility scale projects. There's a shortage of EPC capability emerging. There's a shortage of project managers. There's a shortage of developers. There's even a shortage of people who have basic solar installation skills. So there certainly are opportunities still to find a niche or even play in one of the established spaces, because the market is growing so aggressively. I think the upside is that we have seen, I think for a long time with tariffs only, we never had a feed-in tariff, for example, for C&I projects. C&I were competing with grid tariffs. Margins were very thin in projects, both for IPPs and for EPCs. We've certainly seen some recovery there because of the scale of demand and also the fact that solar technology across the board continues to get cheaper, while local tariffs are growing are going up by double digits every year, and that's likely for the foreseeable future. And of course, then the electricity challenges with the grid outages, the load shedding, the shortage of supply from the grid. This has also been a huge contributor to the wave of solar projects, but also with those solar projects, the deployments of storage. So we've certainly, I think, in the last year or maybe just under a year, seen a real boom in battery projects being deployed, but most of them with solar as well. So it's almost like an additional wave that people are putting in their own generation and storage to create some form of security of supply during load shedding and some resilience against the grid challenges. So yeah, maybe I'll stop there for now.
Okay, fantastic. Then we'll come back to you, I think, on challenges of entering them as a new player into the market, and we can move on to Dirk. So Dirk, perhaps you can introduce yourself and then talk about your topic of grid infrastructure investment required to enable rapid deployment of renewables.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. So I'm Business Development Manager at New Southern Energy. We are a vertically integrated IPP and also an EPC, focusing mostly on commercial, industrial, agricultural, and also hospitality. So a couple of things that you touched on, Lee, which just speaks to the grid infrastructure investment. If we look at the stats that Eskom gave us, is that the new national transmission company confirmed that 1,500 kilometers of new transmission lines are required annually over the next 10 years, just to accommodate the estimated 50 gigawatts of new generation that they're foreseeing that's going to be added to the grid. Now, historically, if we look again at the Eskom data, they've only added 300 kilometers annually over the past 12 years. So, I mean, that leaves a problem, which we're seeing on a daily basis, that there's a need for additional generation, but the capacity is lacking. I think that's obviously a big factor that we're going to see become more relevant. We've already seen it in one of the provinces in South Africa, obviously the Northern Cape. And I think at the rate of solar PV dispatching in South Africa, we're going to see it in other provinces in a very short amount of time that we've seen it compared to in the Northern Cape with all the large utility scale projects. And if we move from transmission to distribution, that's also something that I think is going to become a problem. Again, Eskom confirmed that we need 122,000 MVA of transformation capacity. And in the last 10 years, they've only added 19,000. If we look at their current infrastructure, it's sitting around 160,000 MVA. So we almost need to double the transformation capacity on Eskom side, just to allow for, one, the added generation that we need, and also taking into consideration the decommissioning of a couple of coal-fired plants, which has already been delayed. So considering that delay can only reach a certain point where then decommissioning needs to start happening, I think there needs to be a big push from government side, and especially from Eskom, seeing that the private sector wants to get involved, but even with the new transmission company that's been launched, there's still a majority shareholder, there's still the state. So I think private investors are still a little bit hesitant to invest in that, given that the state-owned entity would still be the majority shareholder and controlling that asset. So yeah, I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on. The amount of solar PV ready projects that are shovel ready is, I think, a lot more than the general public is aware of. Speaking out of experience, we have a small-ish project in the Free State of 5 megawatts, and Eskom's mandate is that within 90 days of submitting a SECG application, you should receive a budget quote. We're sitting at 6 months now, just due to the volume of SECG applications that let's call it region needs to work through. And so you're sitting with a client that wants to assist in the new generation and obviously going a little bit more green, but there's just no clear answer from Eskom if we can move forward with the project. So that's just a practical example of where we're sitting, and I'm sure a lot of EPCs and IPPs are sitting in the same space.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dirk. Yeah, fully agreed. I think, as I said, it's going to be interesting to see if this privatization is actually taken up. We know that at the utility scale size, we know that when it comes to bidding for projects in the REIPP, at least, we know that the only way to really get competitiveness in those projects is to build out a whole cluster of projects, building your own NTS as part of that. So your main Eskom substation, you'll have to build that as part of your big block of projects that you'll be bidding, and you actually need all of those projects to be awarded in order to fund this MTS. And what we've also seen is knock-on effects where a number of projects in, say, round 6 are waiting for RMIPP, the risk mitigation project, so a procurement round that hasn't totally closed at the moment, and some of them are dependent on round 5 reaching commercial operations. So there's a lot of cascading impacts that we're starting to see in this allocation of grid and strengthening of grid. So it's definitely of concern, and it's definitely one of the constraining factors on growth in the market. Yeah. But at least what we're starting to see is with the private markets moving in parallel, we're starting to see project development happen in places that it wasn't happening before. So traditionally, it was the race to the bottom in the REIPP. It was price, getting your price down as low as possible, and that basically just put projects all in the Northern Cape. So PV projects all in the Northern Cape, wind projects all in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape. Now what we're starting to see is developers moving further afield, so more projects in the Free State, Northwest, Mpumalanga, etc., which is a good thing, because you only need to beat the Eskom tariffs. You don't need to be going down to ridiculously low tariffs that we've seen in recent bid rounds. So it's interesting to see how the rest of the country is actually being utilized for projects.
So Leah, I just want to touch on one thing that you mentioned earlier regarding the curtailment. So interesting, there's a recent study by two European transmission system operators done for the Western Cape. I'm just going to read to you here what they determined. So they said that based on the Western Cape grid, the capacity could be doubled with a maximum of 10% curtailment. So the one company, Elia Grid International, reported that 4 gigawatts of additional renewable energy could be connected to the Western Cape almost immediately, with more than 90% of that energy generated by the renewable energy plants could be integrated. So yeah, 10% maximum curtailment, which I think, considering the amount of wind projects that you spoke about earlier that did not move forward, I mean, that's quite a lot. I think it was about 3.6 gigawatts of wind that didn't move forward. So I think there is a way. I think from a commercial point, IPPs need to start looking at the financial models and seeing that if there's a 10% curtailment at worst case, what does the financial outlook come to? And also what you're saying now, because we've moved from a price war to, is it more sustainable for a client, even though it's not the lowest price, you still need to compete against Eskom or local municipalities. I think we've reached a point where even with the 10% curtailment, with the cost of solar PV or renewables in general reducing quite a lot in the last couple of years, still with 10% curtailment, it will make commercial sense to the off-taker and to the IPP as well.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, I also recall reading that in that report. It's very interesting, and that 10% isn't necessarily going to be guaranteed. I mean, it could be some years, it could be certain seasons. It really depends on things. But it is interesting to know that if we were to relax this N-1 contingency and guarantee offtake by an acceptable amount, that more capacity is available. And I think what we must also remember is that we are operating in a market where take or pay is actually a nice benefit that projects enjoy. Elsewhere in the world, projects don't get that kind of guarantee. They work completely on they build the project and they sell power to the grid. And if they're curtailed, they're curtailed. If there are network outages, they suffer accordingly. And you just have to estimate what those upstream losses will be due to the grid, and you factor it into your financial model. So we do have a bit of a blessing in terms of this take or pay agreement structure that we have. And we mustn't forget that, as I said, other markets don't enjoy this benefit. Okay, so moving on from that, I'd like to ask Brandon to come in here and introduce himself, and then maybe he can take us into the current state of solar market in the region and talk about future prospects.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Lee. So Brandon Horn from Solar Africa. Solar Africa is an IPP looking at the C&I space. So as Lee mentioned, that's the commercial and industrial space. Been around since 2011. I think, as Frank mentioned, the market is reaching a certain level of maturity now. But if we have to take back sort of towards 2010, what we've seen is over the last 13 odd years, a 35 billion rand worth of imports in terms of solar. And I think that's the vast majority of that we've seen over the last couple of years. And that's mainly due to two factors. And I think the first factor being obviously load shedding. So we've seen, by nature, South Africans are really, they don't really trust. So they want to see it working first. They want to understand it. A lot of the times people don't want to invest in something. So I think the funded models that are coming through are playing a huge impact in the market. Our funded models have been around since 2007, and that's where we really saw, 2011, and that's where we really saw a massive impact in the market, where you can offer a service where no one's paying for it up front and they're seeing benefits or realizing benefits from that solution. If we fast forward from sort of 2016, we're looking at roughly 1.3 megawatts of installed solar capacity, so really small back in 2016. And the real, as I mentioned, the real factors being load shedding, what we've seen. So fast forward to 2022, and we've seen an import of around 2.2 billion worth of solar panels. And that was only in the first couple of months of the year, so the first 5 months or so. So, I mean, this is really showing you a huge, I think this is go back to where South Africans are resilient to a large degree. We kind of take the bull by the horns. We don't really let things unravel too much, and we're willing to step in. The major, I think, part of that growth is we're seeing our next door neighbors, we're seeing companies who have invested, who've taken that financial knock to a certain degrees in investing prior to anyone else, and realizing the benefits of solar. And I think that was really the barriers to entry in terms of the end user is, first of all, understanding what solar can offer them. It's not just something pretty on the roof that gives you reduced carbon emissions, but it's actually giving you a reduction in your electricity costs. And if coupled with a battery, like Frank mentioned, we've seen massive increase in the battery sales side, but it's giving you that security of supply. So that educational sort of over the last 2 to 3 years has really driven the market. Currently, we're looking at where the capacity's increased from 983 megawatts in March 2022 to roughly about 4.4 gigawatts in June 2023. So, I mean, that's a massive increase. We've definitely see that. So we only deal on the commercial, the C&I space, so commercial and industrial space. And we're seeing most of the companies coming through, and where it was legacy was looking at one savings. We don't really have any issues with the grid, etc. Load shedding. This is prior to load shedding becoming a major factor. It was reduction in overall costs. So in order to stay competitive, how do I look at reducing my overall costs? PPAs, power purchase agreements, was instrumental in that instance. So a capex-free solution up front. You spend absolutely nothing in terms of capex. And as a result of that, you're seeing immediate savings from day one onwards. These are generally done anything over a 10 to a 20-year period. And the system post that initial term of 10 to 20 years is handed over to the customer. So this was, I think, how the market sort of turned. Having realized the financial sort of returns, seeing it working, understanding of what solar is capable of doing, that coupled with, obviously, I think this, we've seen, I say, superficial growth, being load shedding. Load shedding has created massive problems in the market. We've seen companies close doors as a result of load shedding. And unfortunately, coupled with, we've seen a massive increase in the diesel costs. So almost a perfect storm coming through in the last couple of years, where customers are burdened both with load shedding, so downtime, the cost of actual downtime. We've seen, obviously, diesel. So now if you've got a generator, you're having excessive costs in terms of those generators, not just the running cost, but the operational costs behind that. So not just the diesel, the actual operational costs of those generators. They're not meant to run as often as what they were running or are running. So your operational cost of that, the servicing, the maintenance of that generator is increasing. Europe obviously buying up all the diesel recently with Russia, the issues there. So that escalated. The rand obviously has a direct impact on diesel. We've seen a massive increase in the overall running costs of companies. So for them, looking at solar, huge benefit. This is obviously from a cost saving perspective. So their current utility rate, so whatever they're paying, and Lee mentioned this, just need to beat the utility rate. So make sure that they're getting cost savings coming from a solution for long term. Those PPA, power purchase agreements, or an outright purchase gives you that ability to reduce your utility rate and get those savings coming through. On a PPA, you're also looking at a maintenance contract that's built in. So you're paying a fixed rate that has escalated year on year. It always remains cheaper than your utility rate, full maintenance built in. And this is really giving you a solution that, for a customer, they're not a key subject matter expert in renewables. They're running their business. They want to focus on running their business, and they don't want to be burdened by solar. So I think that perfect storm that we've seen really has increased the numbers. And I think we've seen record highs in the industry. Currently, we're seeing, unfortunately, it's dipped off slightly. South Africans, once again, if you look at load shedding, you see a massive influx. As soon as load shedding calms down, people, all of a sudden, problems over. People are we see that on the battery side of things as well. So definitely you see these massive batteries. I mean, we've got a battery going in that's 11 megawatt hours that's going in. So the uptake, the interest when there's load shedding, when it spikes to over stage 6 load shedding, you see a massive uptake in terms of interest. However, these items, they do come at a cost. So batteries, even though you've got, and you need to understand, so South Africa being a relatively mature market, but on the same hand, we're not mature when it comes to batteries. We've never used batteries for peak shaving. We've never used batteries for time of use, etc. So our understanding of batteries is just load shedding right now. And people are using batteries purely just for load shedding. So they say, all right, I need 6 hours. Then you give them the price 6 hours, and there's a bit of a backtrack. It's crazy. There's no ways I'm spending that type of money on a battery for 6 hours, when in essence, you don't really need a battery for 6 hours. You need a battery to take you through your load shedding, and your load shedding on average, if we look at historical figures, is still sitting on around a 2-hour load shedding scenario. There's always a place in the market for generators. We'd never advise to go against those generators. So the generator is there in the instance of grid failure. So post load shedding, you have grid failure, you'll kick over to the generator. You're running the generator for that time, coupled with the solar. And I think that's ultimately what this is all about, is looking at that solution for the client, and understanding where those benefits of solar battery are going to play benefit to the business. Which I think gives us our current stance in the market, where we've seen as of recently, the market has taken a bit of a dip. There's an influx of solar panels in the market currently. What we're likely to see is suppliers wanting to get rid of those solar panels. So you'll see the pricing will be quite competitive. We've had to buy in large amounts of solar panels. I think the forecast, if you looked at the beginning of the year, people were forecasting massive growth, both on batteries and solar. It hasn't, I think the market is definitely in the residential space. It's calmed down slightly. If you were to look at Q4 of last year, when load shedding was at its high, the market's kind of got, so what's happened is you've got I'll use the term, your CEOs of companies, they've got the money, they've bought the systems, they've implemented them now in the residential space. And now what you're seeing is sort of the middle class saying, well, I don't quite have the money to purchase this outright. I need a finance solution. Load shedding now is sitting where it's kind of like, I can manage it. It's not such an issue. It's not such a burden. Should load shedding go up, I think you'll see an increase once again in the uptake of people wanting solar. And that's why I say, going back to that initial statement, it is largely driven by what we're seeing in terms of load shedding. And I want to just, sorry, and I'm jumping around a little bit, Lee, but I want to just go back to the batteries, where we're sort of an immature market in terms of the understanding of batteries. And this is what we need from these type of sessions, is that education around batteries. What can they be used as? It's not just a cost. Batteries can be used to reduce your time of use. They can be reducing your peak demand in certain instances. And this is what batteries and the rest of the market outside of Africa have been used for the last 10 years. We're seeing batteries purely as load shedding. I need power security, so I want a battery. People are saying, right, what happens when load shedding goes away? So 5 years from now, load shedding goes away. And then you're sitting with a cost to company where you're still paying this battery off. If you haven't used it and load shedding goes away, you've still got that cost of that battery if you're not using it. And this is where I think the education around batteries, understanding of businesses, how they use the batteries post load shedding, I think this is critical to, first of all, keeping the doors open for clients, for the end user companies, to get through load shedding scenarios, to reduce their costs, to look at their time of use and peak shaving, and reduce that maximum demand that they're sitting with. I also think what we've seen as of recently, the liberalization sort of the grid, which we unpacked slightly. This is going forward I think the whole market is going to change. You mentioned wheeling IPP, so Solar Africa being an IPP, putting up a 1 gigawatt solar farm. We've got BQs. We're seeing wheeling is becoming a huge part. It will play a huge part in the market going forward. We've also got a trading entity. There's only 4 of them currently in South Africa. So being able to trade short term, being able to, if you look at a similar scenario, so if you take cellular networks, if you take the look at Telkom and how that's evolved over time, you've got more players now where you had one player. Looking back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you had one player. This liberalization of Eskom, the unbundling of Eskom, I think is going to create huge, both for the consumer, but also for the industry at large, the renewable industry at large. You're going to see big shifts and changes in the market. You're going to see trading coming through a lot more prevalent. Short-term contracts, you're going to see the ability to produce at one place, buy excess. So 5-day users now, their PPA rates, like you mentioned, their rates now as a 5-day user, now modeling that on a 5-day user versus the full 7 days, that excess, you can now give them the benefit in their rate, sell that back off into the grid, sell it to a trader. That trader will pick up that excess energy from on-site PV and will be able to wheel that energy and trade that energy likewise. So if you think about it, cell phone contracts, very similar scenario. Initially, 2-year contract, that was about it. Now you're seeing data bundles you can buy on size, you can buy on terms, you can buy very similar to how the market's probably going to go down in South Africa. You're going to see the Eskom unbundling, and as they unbundle, this will create that opportunity for traders, for IPPs, for foreign investment. And this is the exciting part. The foreign investment and local investment will, I think, drive anybody who's investing is going to want to see some form of regulation, safety regulation. And I think this is key to South Africa. I think the industry developing in South Africa is regulation. I think there was a question, I think, about imports, fake products coming in. I think the industry, if it wants to grow, you need to regulate it more. You need to have more controls. Nobody wants to see a fire on a roof as a result of solar. No one wants to see fire as a result of batteries in the market. This, unfortunately, creates massive doubt in the minds of the consumer. And they become more resistant to, like I mentioned before, people trusting, understanding. I want to see my neighbor first install it prior to me installing it. It must work fine. Now, if it's not a regulated market, you've got, once again, you've got these barriers to entry that you mentioned where people are hesitant to invest. With foreign investment, what you're going to find is you're going to have stricter protocols. If I'm investing my money in a project, I want to make sure that everything is going to run smoothly. I want to make sure health and safety is abided by. I want to make sure legislation in terms of registering the system, in terms of getting that return on that investment itself, everything is going to have to be more regulated, which will drive, I think, foreign investment. It will drive local buy-in. So people will become more familiar with the product. They'll understand it. You'll get bigger companies driving sort of the private sector itself. I think it's an exciting sort of 10 years look or view into the future as to what's going to happen in South Africa. Lee, if there's any other questions?
Yeah, thanks for that, Brandon. No, that's great. Lots of insights there. Frank, I want to just circle back to you on the second question I had. If you put your Kanmani hat on, is there space for new entrants into the markets, and what are some of the challenges that are faced as you enter the market?
No, thanks, Lee. Yeah, and I think I did cover that a bit in my last in my comments, but maybe just to reiterate, I think the challenges are that this is an established market, so you're coming into a competitive landscape. We've seen incredibly low tariffs, even in the C&I space, as well as the public tenders. So if one wants to come and play here, one has to come in hard and play hard and be aggressive, and understand the landscape, understand the regulatory landscape, the policy landscape. As I mentioned, it is very different to many other areas of the world. Funding arrangements can be quite different and quite innovative. It's certainly there's certainly money to be made, but it is a little bit like a bit of a gold rush stall where there's lots of players, and if you're not careful, you can get burnt. So I do think that there are opportunities across the spectrum to play as EPC or finance. The opening, as was mentioned, the opening around wheeling and trading is quite exciting. And then even like just on the skill side, that there are emerging opportunities to train people, to be cross-training from other industries into the renewable sector. There's a shortage of skills. So I think even in the legal and finance fraternities, we're also going to see a shortage of people. So there could be opportunities there. But I think key to it is to properly understand the market. I mean, I think, if I look at Kaimani as a Spanish project developer now active in South Africa, they were very clear in their strategic intent to properly understand the South African market, hire an experienced South African team and let them take the lead in the processes. Whereas I've historically also worked for some overseas companies that have tried to direct all the activities from overseas without team, and that just didn't work out. So I do think that with the growth comes opportunity, but also South Africans are very entrepreneurial. So we're seeing a lot of companies, South African startups, getting involved as well, big and small. It's certainly not a walk in the park to come and play in the renewable space in South Africa. It does, require a level of proper strategic understanding, and intent and investment and time to be successful.
Cool, thanks for that. Dirk, maybe I can come back to you. What are you seeing in the market in terms of the split between direct capital investments and PPAs? Where are you seeing people heading to?
Good question, Lee. I think it's first of all industry specific, but more so company specific. So I agree with what Brandon said earlier. I think where PPAs are really valuable to clients is when they have one or two scenarios. Scenario one is where they want to focus on their core business, and they don't want to really be burdened with what size of system, all the technicalities that go with solar PV specifically now. That obviously is where PPA is valuable, because it's really an easy choice for a client then to say, what's the rate per kilowatt hour, what's the guaranteed kilowatt hours yield per year. And it's easy for them to model that internally and say, well, this is what's the saving going to be without any capital outlays. So that's scenario one. Scenario two, where I think PPAs are really also attractive to especially industrial clients, is when a client has capital to spend, but they've got one or two options: either improve efficiencies within their manufacturing plant, extending their manufacturing facilities, etc., or alternatively invest in renewable energy assets. When they then consider a PPA, then they can have basically best of both worlds. So I think in that space, the PPAs are invaluable. And then on the other side, when you have a company which wants to invest their own money, with the tax incentives that the government has put out, there's not really a better place to invest other than renewables at this point, if they have a flat or a fairly consistent baseline and it matches the generation profile of solar PV. So I think that's where capital projects still outshine the PPA market. But I think there's definitely it's becoming more of a 50-50 mixture compared to a couple of years ago where you would mostly see DCI projects. I think we're moving towards it's becoming a 50-50 between, especially also with the volatility in the market. I mean, economically, it hasn't gone well for South Africa in the last couple of years. So companies are a little bit hesitant to spend money now. They want to ride the wave with the interest hikes, etc. So I think in that space, a PPA is again more attractive to a client, which is on the fence. They understand they need to see cost savings, but they just don't want to spend the money now with the PPA. It's obviously very simple. Lastly, on that topic, I would say that when clients consider PPAs, it should be in terms of flexibility. And again, referring to what Brandon said, the knowledge about how battery storage can be incorporated into a PPA or even a battery lease, I think is invaluable. When a client says, well, load shedding assumptions for the next 5 years, how do we model that? When you give them the various scenarios where if load shedding disappears miraculously within 2 years, what's your peak tariff going to be at an escalation of at least 10% per year? What's that return going to be? So I think, again, there with the costs of battery storage, that's where PPAs or lease models can also be very beneficial to clients, for them to focus on their core business and let energy experts advise them. So when you walk, especially in an industrial and commercial side, when you walk in, you're not selling energy, you're selling a solution to a client, which you need to understand their business. And if you understand their business, then you can sell them a solution which is probably most valuable, whether it's a capital project or whether it's a PPA. Understanding what their commercial and energy needs are, I think is what differentiates good EPCs and IPPs from a little bit less experienced companies in South Africa.
Great, thanks. So at this point, I'd just like to open up the floor to all of you if there's something that you'd like to add to the topics that we discussed before we open up to Q&A. No, it seems not. Okay, so we can go to the questions. So the first question we had was, what do we think about the recent flood of panels into South Africa? It's creating extreme volatility in pricing, and do we think that they'll stabilize in the future? And then it goes on to say there have been quite a lot of fake panels imported into the country. Do you think there'll be regulations on the import of solar panels soon? So I think from my point of view, it's only really utility scale projects that can afford to do the proper QA/QC on modules that are coming into the country. From a C&I point of view, I don't know what we could really be doing here. It would be up to the distributors, I suppose, that are bringing in Rubicons and the like, that would need to put this QA/QC in place to make sure that we're not dumping rubbish into the country. So Frank, you want to speak to that?
No, I think it is a challenge, although I don't think, I mean, it's been reported on the fake panels, but I don't think it's as widespread as one might think. I think it's an exceptional case, certainly in terms of the volumes. But it also goes back to a little bit of, let the buyer beware. First of all, ensure that you're buying from a reputable installer who has a track record. And secondly, validate that installer is also using a known distributor. Or if you're an installer as well, to make sure you use a known distributor if you're not buying directly from the panel provider as well. Certainly, quite a number of the manufacturers do stock themselves in South Africa, and for larger orders, or supply their distribution partners. But I think if you're using a well-known distribution partner and you're selecting a credible installer, the risk of that is lower. I think where this problem really creeps in is where people are looking to be as cost effective as possible or to increase their margins as possible, particularly when you're a smaller business and you end up either acting unethically or being duped yourself in terms of supply. But like many things, I think if you strive to do it right, you're likely not to experience that particular problem as a challenge. And then I think in terms of, the module supply into South Africa, I think we've seen module pricing come down quite a lot again across this year, and the market's grown exponentially at the same time. So if there is an excess of modules in the country at the moment, I expect it's going to be taken up pretty quickly. I know there has been a bit of a slowdown in the installation rate, so perhaps there is some stock sitting, but I don't think that ultimately that will be problematic. That's the nature of risk management that distribution companies and stock management companies need to manage as any market, whether you're selling a widget or a solar panel. I always feel like that's a quality problem, that if we've got to the stage that the market is so big that there's large volumes and we're starting to see mismatches between supply and demand, well, that points to maturity. So I think these things will resolve with the growth of the market.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. The next question is, what is the appetite for combo products, so combined inverter and battery, within household space in South Africa, and which cities have highest interest? I'm not sure between Dirk and Brandon if you guys are doing domestic installations, but if either of you have got some insight into this, I would say it would be middle to upper income areas, and basically whichever areas in the country have those highest population densities of middle to upper income earners would be the places that you'd see combination of inverter battery with solar being installed. Brandon, do you want to go for it?
Yeah, sure. So like you mentioned, Lee, we don't delve too much into the residential space, but I think we are homeowners ourselves, so I think we can obviously speak from experience as well. And I think it's alluding to what you've mentioned. So I think you've got two aspects. You've got a UPS scenario, and I think this is where once again that education around product and solution, I think, is key. A lot of homeowners need something that's just going to give them benefit, obviously, of during load shedding. So what you're seeing is most of the hardware stores, etc., are selling UPS, so just an inverter type battery. This gives you the benefit, obviously, of having security of supply during load shedding. Okay, the problem is, and these are mostly those trolley type inverters. They're a smaller scale, but you're charging them with electricity. Okay, and this is where the big pros and cons. So what happens now is when your electricity comes back on, you're putting the grid under severe pressure again, because now all the households, you've got a base load. When electricity comes back on, you've got the standard base load, plus now every single household that's got an inverter without solar needs to charge. So you're finding now that as soon as electricity comes back on, or the grid comes back on after load shedding, you've got the grids collapsing, because now they've got excessive charging of inverters plus the normal base load. So that the first sort of question that you asked was at what type of systems. So most residential households are looking for the load shedding scenario, but then also if you're looking savings, you want to try and reduce your utility bill, you put solar. Solar, when it's grid tied, is going to do nothing for you in a load shedding scenario. You need to couple it, and this is the question, couple it with a hybrid inverter. So then you're going to have the ability to tie in your solar onto your inverter and have a battery, which then in return, depending on how you set it up, you're going to have the cheapest form of electricity charging that battery. Plus, during the daylight hours, when there's no load shedding, you've got the benefit of the solar system actually reducing your utility bill. This ultimately boils down to what your pocket can allow. And this is why I think you're seeing the financing costs. The banks really have stepped in as of late. And I'd say probably, so from a commercial and industrial space, the banks have been doing this for the past 10 years. So maturity in terms of bank financing for C&I space is spot on. You're seeing the banks now providing, I think, residential solar on a solution, and I think that's where we've seen a massive uptake, because most homeowners, depending on obviously where they sit in economical bracket, if you can't afford 125,000 Rand solar system, then that's it. You're not going to get that. You're going to get a small little UPS that's going to keep the Wi-Fi on, and ultimately that keeps the family happy. Because if there's no Wi-Fi in the household, everybody is in dire straits. So the banks have now given a different level to funding of solar systems. So this is a huge benefit, I think, that we've seen in the residential space, where now you don't have to fork out 125,000, you pay 3,500 Rand roughly. Obviously it goes up depending on what you need, but 3,500 Rand per month. You're seeing a slight decrease obviously in your utility bill, and you're not having to, if you've got a generator, fill up that little jerry can so often to put in diesel or petrol for your generator. So yeah, I think definitely we're seeing hybrid systems out there. I think that combination is becoming more popular due to the financing aspect. But I think the large majority of what you're seeing out in the residential space is probably still on a UPS type scenario, where you've got an inverter battery, which takes care of the load shedding. People aren't, you can buy that, you can then plug in appliances, etc. You don't need an installation company to come through. What Frank said is very relevant, and I think this is, they're referred to obviously as the Bucky Brigade, and we're seeing more and more of it. You're seeing guys who now historically have done, obviously not knocking anyone, but historically you've done security, you've done electric fences, alarms, CCTV, you're an electrician now, so you're doing solar. I think that regulation of the market, likewise with qualified electricians, you're working with electricity. The chances of something going wrong, fatally wrong, are high. You don't want to be pushing back into the grid, so that when the grid is off and the guys are working on outside your pavement, they're obviously getting the repercussions of your system pushing back into the grid. You also don't want to make sure that your house burns down due to bad connections, faulty equipment, panels that aren't correct, etc. So you want to regulate this market, and I think that's the critical steps behind I think the growth of the industry, is making sure that the bad experiences are mitigated through correct installers, like Frank mentioned. Make sure that they've been in the market for a while, they understand what they're doing, and they're not fly-by-nights. I think that's the key to obviously having any installation.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Okay, then moving on. So would the push for curtailment due to grid capacity limitations not be sufficiently handled by long-term battery energy storage, such as flow batteries? So I think BESS in general, co-located with renewable energy projects, is an obvious way forward. We don't know what the extent or the mechanism of curtailment would be. I would think it's not necessarily long-term curtailment that the government, or sorry, that Eskom would implement. It would be just load balancing intermittently throughout the day, and that means that I think any kind of storage, lithium-ion or flow batteries would be suitable. But maybe Frank, seeing that you worked for a flow battery company recently, you could maybe give some insight.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Lee. Yeah, in my previous role, I was working on vanadium redox flow batteries and spent a lot of time looking at the applications for batteries. I mean, just on the curtailment side, I think the capacity challenge is, for example, in the Northern Cape, that there's a lot of solar farms, and in the middle of the day, the capacity is all allocated. But come, the early morning or late evening, there's actually a lot of capacity because the sun isn't winding, sun isn't shining, and wind could be built alongside that with only minor curtailment to allow that additional wind. So I think curtailment unlocks, or allowing plants to curtail unlocks capacity. But to unlock even more capacity, we will need storage on the grid, for the same reason that the capacity factor of a solar farm, let's just use round numbers, let's say it's 30%, and you build a wind farm and it's 30% after curtailment, you're still only using 60% of the theoretical grid capacity there. So if you were to go and build another a battery of the right size, theoretically you could build a complete whole new solar or wind farm, capture all that energy into the battery, and dispatch it when the grid is underutilized, and thus drive up the utilization of grid. And certainly, I think in the large battery projects that both Eskom is building themselves and that has been procured through the IPP office, through the energy storage procurement round, are looking to do that by building at strategic nodes where there are capacity constraints. And, I think that coupled, the battery technology will then become a function of the use cases that those batteries are looking to do. So if you're looking to charge and discharge on long duration cycles, then lithium may not be the perfect choice for that, or maybe it becomes a combination of technologies. And I think it was also alluded to, of course, that batteries can do so many more things than just the obvious applications of backup power, and perhaps the one that we're discussing now, which is time shifting energy. That they can, the additional services that can provide to the utility or a customer can also be monetized, whether they're ancillary services or peak demand management or increased renewables penetration. There's a lot of business cases to be explored there. So I'm not sure if I've properly answered the question.
No, I think that's fine. Thanks, Frank. Okay, the next question: have you found end users still more interested in implementing a load shedding solution, so UPS, or is there a shift to implement a solution with solar to reduce energy costs? I think it would really be down to the amount of capital that a homeowner has, and what their appetite for a turnaround in capital investment would be. Are they willing to wait for 7 years for payback on investment of including solar within the installation? But perhaps any of you guys have got something to add on that. I would say it would still be load shedding. Proofing your house is still the majority of the use case. Okay, no further thing. Okay, then Chris Joubert, he has said, so it's more of a statement. I think more, again, just reiterating his opinion on flow batteries, which I fully agree with here. Okay, then when do you think the unbundling of Eskom will take full effect? Hold on, the question has jumped. Or are we years away from it? So I've recently read an article that says that as of the new financial year next year, Eskom will implement the National Transmission Company. So they're waiting for end of year. So the 1st of April next year, they say it will be ready. But we wait and hope. So let's see what happens with that. The next one is, are there any regulations as yet regarding inverters? Yes, there are. And in particular in Cape Town, the decision has just been made that they will only allow inverters that are on their white list to be installed. So there is a bit of a grace period, but in terms of new installations that will be installed, I would think from the new year onwards, you're only going to be able to use inverters that are approved by the city of Cape Town. The other provinces, I'm not too sure, but I think they would follow suit of what Cape Town is implementing. Then there's one of what is your feeling on the recent RSA budget shortfall having possible spin-off in Treasury not honoring sovereign debt cover on existing PPAs? Should Eskom default on payment as the energy off-taker? Comes off Treasury's warning to broader government drastically reduce spending. I guess I'm not sure if we are the people to be answering that. That's more of a financial economic question. So I don't think we can answer that one, unfortunately. I'm more interested in training and certified installers across the country, especially the outskirts. Where can I find them? So I think the best thing there would be to email Sapphire, because Sapphire will have a list of vendors that can provide training for certified installers around the country. Okay, and you said you're from Kimberley. Yeah, so I would contact Sapphire to get that information. Okay, and then the question, the last one we've got here is, when do you foresee Eskom ending load shedding given the massive amounts of residential solar reducing the load on the grid? For me personally, I think load shedding is still with us for another 5 years minimum. I don't know if anybody else has got any inputs, but we're not going to be seeing the back of load shedding for a long time to come. It's going to be systemically with us. Frank?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than that because of the as I call it, the tsunami of private sector projects coming. I do think, and Eskom is. I was on a call this morning with a report back from Eskom on the work that they're doing on the power stations, and I do think that eventually the work will reap some fruit, and we will see on the power stations the energy availability factor at least stabilize, if not improve slightly. But then with the tremendous build rate that the private sector is expecting to deploy renewables, I do think that we will see over time a reduction in load shedding. So Lee, maybe 5 years is right actually to end it, but that over these 5 years we will see a shift from stage 4 downwards. And less of it, so that it eventually becomes a thing of the past. Obviously, it's not without risk because we still, like we discussed, need the investment into transmission infrastructure. There's still elections and politics that could come to play here. But I'm optimistic that if the private sector is allowed to invest to solve these problems, that they will get solved, certainly over that timeline. But I mean, beyond that, that's just starting to address the challenges, because we also want to, of course, see economic growth on the back of that. And that means new build, new generation beyond that time frame. The coal power stations are all going to come to the end of life in the next decade. And so it goes back to that market growth that we actually need to be building 5 to 10 gigawatts of renewables a year. And we're not at that build rate yet. So that's the opportunity, is that actually to both solve the problem and to grow the South African market in terms of companies and jobs and the like. It's not just about solving load shedding. It's also then becomes about keeping growing the amount of electricity available so that we can grow the economy as well. And that does excite me, because we're looking at like a 20-year horizon of significant infrastructure spend on electricals, and most of that is going to be wind and solar and storage. So that's a huge opportunity.
Great. Okay, so we've come to the end of those that have asked questions. I don't see any more, so I think we can perhaps do a wrap up then. I don't know if you guys have got any final remarks you'd like to make before I hand back. No? Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time, panelists. Very interesting discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that knowledge-packed and insightful session. A big thanks to our esteemed speakers for this wonderful session. And thank you to the audience as well for investing their valuable time. A very special thanks to Mr. Smith for superbly managing the session and collaborating with us on this event. A big shout out to our attendees for their extremely valuable time, and thanks to our partner Clenergy for their immense support to organize this event. We promise you to come back soon with more exciting sessions. The floor is now open for network. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.